Hello and welcome to Creating Disciples with me, Austin Roberts. We are so happy that you've decided to join us today. We hope that the Lord will bring great blessings through this message. Now, we're going to be looking today at a part of the Gospel of John. Jesus, as you may well imagine, is a man of prayer. He prays for many things. That's how he keeps in communication with his Father. So we're going to be looking at a part of one of the prayers of Jesus that we find in the Gospel of John, one that holds great weight, perhaps for you and for me. So once again, thank you for joining us. We hope the Lord blesses you in many, many ways. Have you ever had someone who's been particularly difficult to work with? Perhaps someone that was really, really stubborn, didn't want to change the way they did things, was just all around unpleasant. I don't know about you, but I've had experiences like that before, and if I think about it, many people have probably had experiences like that before. I remember a few years ago, I had to do a title transfer at the DMV. Now, I don't like to make it a habit to spend a lot of time at the DMV because that's a place that is full of unhappiness and full of sadness because that just seems to be the nature of the DMV. But every once in a while, you just have to go. There is business you got to take care of that there's no other way to do it. And that's how it was for this transfer of title for this car. So I went to the DMV. Now, I was smart. I made an appointment. I don't know how the DMVs are around where you live, but here in California, DMV lines can be hours long. So I made an appointment and I thought, I'm going to get in there, have this appointment. I'll be in and out, short amount of time, 30, 45 minutes, and we'll be good. So I'd made this appointment and I made my way to the DMV on the day I'd made the appointment for. And I got there just to realize that there is a line for the appointments. And I thought, oh, here we go. So I got in line for the appointments and waited there for a few minutes. And finally, I got to the front of the line. And the lady that was there was very cheerful, very happy, uncharacteristically so for the DMV. And I thought, thank goodness, maybe this experience won't be nearly as painful as I had anticipated. And so I got there, she checked me in, she said, okay, did you bring this, that? All right, we're good, you've got all the things you need. And then she gave me this little piece of paper. On it had a letter and a number that was just basically for me to wait in another line to see one of the people that was there doing the actual work for all the different things that need to happen at the DMV. So I just waited in the line just to get in line for another line. And again, I was like, oh, goodness, here we go. But I thought, hey, that lady had been cheerful. She'd been very nice and helpful. So we'll be all right. Well, I waited in that line, and it took a little while, but finally I looked up and I saw the letter and number that corresponded with what I had, and I thought, great, my turn. So they called in, they said, go to this window. So that's what I did. Got up, went to that window, had all my things ready. Well, I got there, and the lady that was behind that desk was about as unhappy and grumpy as the lady before me had been happy and cheerful. And I thought, goodness me, well, hopefully this will be a short process. So I tried not to say anything out of line or mess anything up because I thought, ooh, she probably has the power to charge me extra money or make my life more difficult or make me have to go and come back, and I do not want that. So I did everything just as she said. I handed over the right paperwork at the right time, signed the things I had to sign, and finally it had gotten done. There was just one last thing that needed to happen before everything was done. There was a $15 fee for transfer of title. And I was like, okay, I can pay that $15 fee. And she asked for it, and I opened my wallet, got out my debit card, and handed it to her. And she said, you don't have cash? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't often carry around cash, but the debit card, it's all I have. And she began to kind of mutter under her breath and go on about how using a debit card made the process so much longer. She had to do all these other things. And I was like, oh, goodness me. Well, hopefully this doesn't take too long. And so she swiped it. She told me to enter my PIN, which I went in there and did. And literally 5 seconds later, it was over. The fee had been paid, the title had been transferred, and I sat there thinking, this long process for this debit card took 5 seconds? What was the point of being so grumpy? Why did she need to go on and lecture me and go on this tirade about the process being so much more difficult without $15 in cash? And I was like, my goodness, why do some people have to be so difficult? Have you ever had an experience like that? Maybe for you, it's someone at work. Maybe for you, it's a colleague, a classmate, someone at home that just seems to be contrary, just almost for the sake of it. I don't know about you, but I've had experiences like that before in my life, and they are not fun. It reminds me of another story. On one night in particular, many years ago, on the Black Sea, there were two ships that were sailing, the Admiral Nakhimov and the Peter Vasev. And the captains of these ships and the people around them knew that these two ships were on a collision course and they would have to make some adjustments to go around each other. Well, inexplicably, something went wrong and the two ships indeed did collide. It resulted in a loss of life for 423 people, and they didn't know what had happened. Well, naturally, there was an investigation done into this incident, and the investigation found out that the captains of both of these ships had known that they were going to collide for 45 minutes before the collision. But neither of them had enough humility to change their course and avoid the collision, so they crashed. And it ended in a loss of life for a lot of people. They were stubborn. They just didn't want to give way just a little bit to somebody else. And so each of these men spent 15 years in prison for failing to have just a little humility, for failing to be just a little less stubborn, for failing to move their ship just a few degrees to the right or to the left so that these two ships wouldn't crash. I don't know about you, but when I have experiences with people who are particularly difficult and don't want to give an inch, it kind of irks me. And I imagine that the same is true for you, someone that is just overly stubborn for no apparent reason whatsoever. Well, if you've had that issue, take courage, for you are not alone. In fact, the Savior of our world, Jesus Christ, had the same issue with some of the people on this earth. In fact, probably with all of the people on this earth. Everybody can be just a little stubborn and a little pushy in moments where it is unnecessary. So, we're going to open today to the Gospel of John, chapter 17. And we're going to see that Jesus had the same issue that I had with this lady at the DMV, that the captains of the Peter Vasev and the Admiral Nakhimov had with each other, and that no doubt many of you have had with somebody before. So, before we read this part of the text, let's look at a little background information here. John chapter 17 is very near the end of his gospel. Jesus has done almost everything that he will do in his ministry. He is very near his death. In fact, in the very next chapter, John chapter 18, Jesus is going to get arrested. But here in John chapter 17 is a prayer that Jesus prays for a number of different things. In fact, this prayer is split into 3 parts, and we're going to be reading the third part. Now, the first part is a part of this prayer where Jesus prays for himself. He prays for himself to be glorified. Then the second part of this prayer, Jesus prays for his disciples. He prays for those 12 who have at that point become 11 and who will face untold difficulties and hardships in their lives that they are yet unaware of. So he prays for himself, then he prays for his disciples. And then in the third part of this prayer, which we will be reading today, Jesus expands his prayer and he prays for the rest of the world. He prays for everybody. He prays for you, he prays for me, and he prays for everybody in this world. All those who will follow him, and doubtless all those who will not end up following him. Jesus prays for everybody. So, let's read this together. We're going to begin by reading John chapter 17, verses 20 through 23. Jesus prays this prayer. My prayer is not for them alone. Speaking about his disciples, his prayer is not just for his disciples. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. So that is the first part of the prayer that we are looking at today. And I think if you read that and you examine it, and you don't even have to examine it all that closely, you can see the message in this part of the text. You can see what Jesus is praying for. The word one appears 3 times in the text. The idea of unity itself appears at least 4 times in this portion of the text. So it's easy. Jesus is praying for unity. And he's praying for unity not just amongst his disciples, but among everybody, all of his followers in this world. And he's saying, listen, I want them to be unified. I want them to be one. I want them to have a common goal, and I want them to be all together. I guess it reminds me a little bit of a snowflake. Now, I live here in Southern California, and it does not snow hardly ever here. In fact, I lived here from the time I was born until I was 18 and I went to college, and then moved back 7 years after that and have lived here since then. In all those years that I have lived here, I have one memory, one crystal clear memory in my head of looking outside my bedroom window one morning and seeing snow. In Southern California, that just doesn't happen. I have plenty of memories of looking at the thermometer and it saying 112 degrees during the summer, because that happens all the time here. But I don't have very many memories of snow in Southern California. But if you live somewhere where there's a lot of snow, you know what that's like. Now, snow obviously comes when it snows and when there are snowflakes. Now, if we were to examine each individual snowflake through a microscope, we would notice something interesting. And that is, as researchers have stated, that each snowflake is unique and different. There are no 2 snowflakes that are exactly alike. But one snowflake in and of itself makes no difference at all. If I were to go outside in Southern California when it's 112 degrees outside and let a snowflake drop, it would melt before it dropped even an inch. One snowflake makes no difference. But many snowflakes together make snow. And as I've said, if you live in a place where there's a lot of snow, you know what that can be like. Snow can disrupt travel. It can ground planes. It can prevent you from driving to and from work or school or anywhere else. Snow can cave in roofs if you're not careful. Every morning you've got to go outside and shovel out your driveway so you can get in and out. Snow, if people aren't careful, can even kill them in certain situations where there are avalanches and so forth. If you spend too much time outside the snow without proper equipment and clothing, you can freeze to death. Altogether, snowflakes make a lot of snow, and there is a lot of power in there. And it's kind of the same way in what Jesus is saying here. He's asking for unity. He knows that one follower of Christ makes no real difference at all unless there is a community that surrounds that person and unless there's unity in and amongst them. He's saying, listen, you all need to be in this together. You need to have unified vision, a common goal, and bring disciples to Christ. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me, because what I am saying is that we need, and that Jesus is praying for, unity. Now, unity can at times be misunderstood as uniformity. And that is not what Jesus is praying for here, and that is not what I am saying here. Uniformity is the idea that every single person has the exact same thing in mind. There is no divergence to the left or to the right. There is no disagreement anywhere whatsoever. But that's not what Jesus is praying for here, because uniformity is unhealthy. Imagine if my wife Nicole and I never, ever had a single disagreement. You know what that would mean? That would mean one of us in this marriage is unnecessary. That would mean one of us is allowing the other person to just walk over us like a carpet. That would mean one of us isn't looking out and being careful and just pushing their way all the time. But that's not how it is in a marriage. That's not how it is in our marriage. We don't fight every single day or all the time or disagree about everything. But every once in a while, we don't quite see eye to eye. One of us wants Thai food to eat. The other one of us wants Italian food to eat. And you know what that means? That means we have to talk about it and come to a compromise, or one of us has to give way every once in a while. And that is the idea of unity. Because at the end of the day in a marriage, we want the same thing. We have a covenant. We are committed to each other and to not allowing anyone else to break that marriage up. That is unity. It doesn't mean that you agree on every single small detail every single time, but it does mean that you have a unified vision and a common goal. And that is what Jesus prays for here for the world, for all of his followers, from his disciples to the baby that was just born yesterday. He says, give them unity, O Lord. Help them to see this common goal and vision, even if they don't see eye to eye on every single detail, because that is unity. But that is not the only thing he prays for here. Let's move forward. There is a second thing, in fact, and let's keep reading this prayer. This time we're going to read just verse 24. Jesus prays, Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am, and to see my glory, the glory you have given me because you loved me before the creation of the world. So moving on, once again here, we have a second thing. And Jesus prays for what here? He prays for togetherness in heaven. So first, remember, he's prayed for unity, and that is something here that is on earth. That is how we spread the message and the gospel to the corners of the earth that have not heard it yet. But then he's praying for something for his followers after their death. He's saying, bring them together with me here in heaven. I want togetherness in heaven. Now, unbeknownst to many of the people and his disciples even, that idea of togetherness in heaven won't come without sacrifice, because that is the cost of following Jesus. Kenneth Dodge, in his book Resource, talks about the men that signed the Declaration of Independence. And I want to read you what he says about those men that signed that Declaration of Independence at the birth of our nation, the United States of America. Dodge says this, 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. Their conviction resulted in untold sufferings for themselves and their families. Of the 56 men, 5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost their sons in the Revolutionary Army. Another had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 fought and died from wounds or hardships of the war. Carter Braxton of Virginia, a wealthy planter and trader, saw his ships sunk by the British Navy. He sold his home and properties to pay his debts and died in poverty. At the Battle of Yorktown, the British General Cornwallis had taken over Thomas Nelson's home for his headquarters. Nelson quietly ordered General George Washington to open fire on the Nelson home, his own home. The home was destroyed, and Nelson died bankrupt. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside as she was dying. Their 13 children fled for their lives. His fields and mill were destroyed. For over a year, he lived in the forest and caves, returning home only to find his wife dead and his children vanished. A few weeks later, he died from exhaustion. Now, if you haven't done the math, I have. That is 33 of the 56 men suffered some form of difficulty and hardship because of signing the Declaration of Independence. Now, if I were to tell you, listen, sign this document at the birth of this nation, we don't even know for sure if we're going to be able to pull this off. And then on top of that, you will have a 60% chance of yourself suffering and dying, your family suffering and dying, your property getting taken away, destroyed, all your wealth getting taken by the British. Would you do it? Would you sign that document that nearly guarantees you some sense of difficulty and hardship? That's a hard sell. To be honest with you, I don't know if I would have the guts to go through with that. But Jesus here prays for these people because he knows that following Christ carries with it a chance of difficulty and hardship. Once again, you look at the disciples. Every single one of them met some untimely death or suffered some sense of torture throughout their lives. Christians throughout the centuries and the millennia have had the same happen to them. From the very inception of the church, when it was just 11 people, to today, when the Christian church is billions of people, somebody somewhere is suffering for that faith. They are suffering physically or mentally or emotionally or spiritually. They are suffering because others who have power and don't like the message of Christ Jesus our Lord brings the pain down upon them. And Jesus understands that reality because despite the difficulties that those people face, that you face, that I face, that the people who signed the Declaration of Independence face, that all really pales in comparison to the torture and the suffering that Jesus himself lived through and died because of. He had to suffer separation from his Father in heaven above for 3 days. And I don't know what it's like for you, but it is hard enough to suffer separation from someone you love for just a couple of days, even if you know they're coming back. But Jesus suffered the ultimate penalty. He paid the biggest price. He suffered the most out of any of us so that we could be together in heaven once again. And he prays for that here in this part of the text. He says, listen, oh God, bring us together in heaven. He says, Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am and to see my glory, the glory you have given me because you loved me before the creation of the world. Jesus prays and says, listen, oh God, bring us together in heaven. I know you can't do it this very second, this very moment, but bring us together that one wonderful day that is coming. And so far he's prayed for 2 things. One, he's prayed for unity. He's prayed that his followers will be of one mind and one body and one spirit, even if they don't see eye to eye on all the details, even if there's some conflict and some butting of heads within the church. He's praying for unity nonetheless. Then, following that, he prays for togetherness in heaven because he knows that people are going to suffer here on this earth. That is the price of following Christ for some of us. That is the price of following Christ for many of us, suffering in some sense or another. But then there's a third and final part of this text. So let's read it together. We're going to read verses 25 and 26. Jesus prays this. Righteous Father, though the world does not know you, I know you, and they know that you have sent me. I have made you known to them and will continue to make you known in order that the love you have for me may be in them and that I myself may be in them. So remember, he's already prayed for unity, and he's also prayed for togetherness in heaven, but he's praying for the people who don't know the Father here in this final part of the text. He's praying for people who have no real relationship with the Father. Think about it. It's kind of like you know about some celebrity. Take for example, let's say Taylor Swift. I can tell you that Taylor Swift's middle name is Allison, that she was born in Pennsylvania, that she's a great musician. I could probably sing some of her songs and know the lyrics and this and that and the other. But none of you are under the illusion that I actually know her as a person. I don't know the food she likes. I don't know her hobbies, who she likes, what she doesn't like. I don't know where she lives, and none of that. The truth is, all the information I can give you, you can get for yourself on Wikipedia. None of you are really under the impression that I know her personally. I don't have the time to go seek her out and become friends. She certainly doesn't have the time to seek me out and become friends. And sometimes it's kind of like that with the Father, with God. We know all about him. We know about Jesus and about the Holy Spirit. We know about the things he's done. We can witness some of the things he's done for people we know. But do we really know him? Do we really take the time to be in a relationship with God? I don't know. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. I guess it kind of reminds me of a story, what it means to know Jesus intimately. Well-known author, philanthropist, and lawyer Bob Goff authored a book by the name of Love Does. And he tells a story about himself in Love Does. He had didn't really enjoy school and had kind of dropped out and he wanted to go and do his own thing in Yosemite Valley. And he had a friend, kind of a mentor by the name of Randy. And he went to Randy one day and had told him and just stopped by to say goodbye because Randy had meant a lot to him. He said, listen, I'm going to the Yosemite Valley. Well, Randy kind of disappeared into his house and then reappeared and said, Bob, I'm coming with you. So they went there to the Yosemite Valley, slept on some cold nights in a tent as Bob looked for work and tried to figure out what he was going to do. And it became apparent pretty quickly that his dream wasn't going to come true because he just couldn't find work. He had no high school diploma, no real work experience. And you kind of need those things really to find a job. Well, as Bob tells the story, on their way back, he writes it like this. We didn't talk much as we left Yosemite Valley, or for much of the way home for that matter. A dream of mine had just checked into hospice, and Randy was sensitive enough to know I needed some margin to think. We drove for 5 or 6 quiet hours. Every once in a while, Randy would check in on me in his confident and upbeat voice. Hey, how are you doing, Bob? We pulled down some familiar streets and into Randy's driveway. There was another car in the drive next to Randy's that looked like his girlfriend's. She visited often. We walked up to the front door and he opened it. I walked in behind Randy, uninvited, but somehow still felt welcome. On the floor, I noticed a stack of plates and some wrapping paper, a coffee maker, some glasses. On the couch, there was a microwave, half in a box. I didn't understand at first. Had Randy just had a birthday? Was it his girlfriend's? A microwave seemed like a weird way to celebrate someone's arrival into the world. I knew Randy wasn't moving because there wouldn't be any wrapping paper. Then, the other half of this couple bounded out and threw her arms around Randy. Welcome home, honey. Then the nickel dropped. I felt both sick and choked up in an instant. I realized that these were wedding presents on the floor. Randy and his girlfriend had just gotten married. When I had knocked on Randy's door that Sunday morning, Randy didn't see just a high school kid who had disrupted the beginning of his marriage. He saw a kid who was about to jump the tracks. Instead of spending his early days of his marriage with his bride, he spent it with me sneaking into the back of a tent. Why? It was because Randy loved me. He saw the need and he did something about it. He didn't just say he was for me or with me, he was actually present with me. What I learned from Randy changed my view permanently about what it meant to have a friendship with Jesus. Because isn't that true about Christ? He doesn't just say he knows you or say he loves you. He is there and he is present. And he is with you sneaking into the back of that tent. He's with you when you want to jump the tracks. And he's with you when you realize, perhaps, that there is another and a better way. So Jesus prays for these things. He prays for unity. He prays for togetherness in heaven. And then he prays that we will truly and honestly know the Father. And he prayed that for you and for me. Thank you for joining us today. We hope the Lord has blessed and that you will join us again next time.